Now we're a few weeks into the wilderness journey, and they're pretty deep into the wilderness. And by this point, they've eaten through all the food supplies they brought along with them from Egypt. So they've eaten everything they carried in their backpacks. And so now they're looking for something to eat. And so they say, verse 2, God, look at it in your Bible. You have faithfully led us thus far. God, what do you have for us now? Is that what your Bible says? No. Verse 2, the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled again against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And then they repeat the colossally stupid line, verse 3, if only we had died in Egypt, where we sat by pots of meat and ate bread to the full. First of all, what are pots of meat? I am in for that. But these people are like, man, we had it so good. We had it so good back there. It was like we were living at the Golden Corral. All you can eat pots of meat, an unlimited yeast roll service, plus a queso fountain. You could hold your chips under and let the queso run all over your fingers and back down into the fountain just like it has for the previous 100 patrons. Man, we had it so good back then. This, of course, was a ridiculous statement because that is precisely not how it was back in Egypt. But see, they're doing what we always do with sin, what the entire entertainment and media complex does with sin. They are romanticizing the pleasures and minimizing the devastation. Adultery is amazing. But let's not talk about the devastated lives in both families that result from that disastrous choice. Vengeance is so satisfying. But let's not talk about the bitter person you become when you hold that kind of anger in your heart, right? This material prosperity is awesome, but let's not talk about all the compromised integrity and destroyed family that you leave in the wake of when you pursue something like that. Y'all, if I were God, I would be about done with Israel, but God is a God who is slow to anger. That's how God will describe himself in Exodus 34, which means God gets angry, but it takes a while. By the way, fun thing in the Hebrew language, in Hebrew, slow to anger is literally long of nostrils. And you might ask, like, why would they use long of nostrils to mean slow to anger? Well, what happens when you get angry, right? Your nostrils flare. And if you're quick-tempered, your flaring nostrils get going right away. But if you're slow to anger, then you close your mouth and you breathe through your nose slowly and you say goose farah or whatever it is that you need to say to calm down. In other words, you can make God mad, but you really got to work at it. God is more patient than the most patient parent, thank God. In fact, let me just tell you, that's how he feels about you right now. I know some of you feel like God's been upset at you since you were a kid. I want you to understand that this is a God that is slow to anger, and that the fact that you're here this morning means that there's a patience and there's a mercy and there is a very good God that is drawing you because he loves you, and that's why you're here. So what does God do for these complaining people who are complaining again and again? He feeds them. Again, he does it in royal fashion. Verse 13 says, in the evening, quail literally came up and covered the camp. Right? And then dew lay all around the camp that evening. Literally that evening, quail just came up and landed by their tents. I mean, y'all, that is better than Grubhub, right? You don't have to tip the quail. The animals just fly up to your tent, land on your porch and like, I'm here, ready to be eaten. Then that night, verse 14, the dew falls on the ground, and when it dries up, it leaves this little fine flake-like thing all over the ground. It's almost like a frost that covered the ground, it says. Verse 31, now the people of Israel called the name of this mysterious frost, they called it manna. Manna in Hebrew is literally manhu, which literally means what the heck is it? Verse 31 goes on to describe what it is, or the best they could describe it. It was like coriander seed. It was white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. It's like I've told you, it's a mix between a Twinkie and a protein bar. You thought I was just making that up, but that's basically how Moses describes it. Well, just as with the bitter water bonus quiz, God is doing more than simply teaching him that he'll provide. God is also teaching them lessons about how he'll provide. Remember, this is not just a test, it's a lesson. And so God gives them two rules. Rule number one for the manna, you can only gather enough for one day. If you try to stockpile this manna, you put an extra supply in your closet or try to stock your prepper bunker with it, fearful that maybe one day or tomorrow you're gonna wake up and there's not gonna be any on the ground, then whatever you stockpile is gonna go bad. Literally it says, chapter 16, verse 20, that it will breed worms and stink up your house. The one exception to this rule was on the eve of the Sabbath. And on that day, and that day alone, this is rule number 2, you can and must collect enough for 2 days. You see, on the Sabbath, no manna would fall because God didn't want them out gathering on the Sabbath day. That was too much like work. So the Sabbath was their manna pause. I got manna puns for days, so just you get ready. So on the eve of the Sabbath, and on that one day alone, you were allowed to gather enough manna for 2 days, and God would preserve that manna supernaturally from going bad for an extra 24 hours. That was rule number 2. What is he teaching them? He's saying, trust me, I will always take care of you every day. And don't try to stockpile that manna, because manna is not your security for the future. I'm your security. Don't stockpile the provision. You keep your eye on the provider. You always put me first. You're going to show that by the fact that you honor the Sabbath, because that, putting me first, that is the condition of my taking care of you.